So, in America's biggest city, a mayoral election just happened that sent some serious shockwaves across the entire country. Today, we're going to break down how a 34-year-old Democratic socialist pulled off a victory that nobody saw coming, stared down a former president, and became New York's new leader. Let's dive in. And check this out. This was the warning shot fired by none other than Donald Trump just before Election Day. It was a direct threat aimed right at the frontrunner, Zohran Mamdani. This really set the stage for a pretty dramatic showdown between a former president and a candidate who wanted to completely reshaping New York politics. All right, first up, a truly historic upset. To really get a grip on what happened, we first have to understand just how groundbreaking this victory actually is. Seriously, this wasn't just another election. It was a moment that absolutely shattered some long-standing barriers in New York City. I mean, Mamdani's win was a big deal on so many levels. He's New York City's first ever Muslim mayor and its first South Asian mayor. And get this, at just 34, he's also the youngest person to hold that office in more than 100 years. But look, these aren't just symbolic firsts. They really signal a deep, deep ideological shift in American urban politics. Okay, so next up, who is Zohran Mamdani? You gotta be asking yourself, right? Who is the guy at the center of this political earthquake? Well, his journey to City Hall is just as incredible as the win itself. So Mamdani's story starts back in 1991. He was born in Uganda and then moved to New York when he was a kid. His political career basically caught fire in 2020 when he got elected to the state assembly, fighting for tenants' rights. Just 5 years later, he launches a mayoral campaign, wins a primary that shocked everyone, and now he's leading America's largest city. Talk about a meteoric rise, right? So what was the secret sauce? Well, his whole victory was powered by a platform that really spoke to a grassroots base. You know, people who are often ignored in city politics. He was talking about housing for all, making city buses free, freezing rent, and hitting luxury real estate with a new wealth tax. And his tough critiques of Wall Street really hit home for New Yorkers who were just struggling to get by. And you could really see the power of that message in the Democratic primary. He was going up against Andrew Cuomo, a former governor and a total establishment favorite. Mamdani was the clear underdog. But here's the kicker. He didn't just squeak by. He beat Cuomo by a pretty wide margin, clinching the nomination in a total upset. The win was so stunning, in fact, that Senator Bernie Sanders called it one of the great political upsets in modern American history. And you gotta remember, this guy started his campaign with like 1% support. His grassroots movement just completely rewrote the rules. But as you'll see, winning the primary, that was just the beginning of the fight. All right, next section, Trump enters the fray. With Mamdani as the official Democratic nominee, a new and very powerful opponent stepped into the ring, former President Donald Trump. And yeah, Trump did not hold back. He started calling Mamdani a communist and flat out threatened to cut off federal funding to New York City if he won. I mean, this kind of thing, a former president jumping into a local election like this, it's incredibly rare. The rhetoric got really intense really fast. Trump called Mamdani a radical leftist who would destroy the city. And then, in this wild twist, he kinda sorta endorsed Andrew Cuomo, who was running as an independent. He basically said Cuomo was a bad Democrat, but at least not a communist. Okay, but this brings up a huge question, right? That threat was explosive, but was it even real? Can a president actually just decide to cut off a city's federal funding like that? Well, the short answer, not really. While a president has some sway, sure, it's actually Congress that controls the purse strings for most federal funding. Any move to just slash those funds on his own would almost certainly get shot down in court. So the threat was really more about politics than any real legal power. Okay, on to our next section, the decisive victory. So you have all this pressure from a former president, but Mamdani and his supporters, they did not back down. Let's take a look at how election night actually played out. And in the end, that threat from Trump, it just didn't land. Mamdani cruised to a pretty decisive victory with 58% of the vote. He comfortably beat the Republican candidate, Curtis Sliwa, and Andrew Cuomo's independent run. It was all the proof needed that his grassroots movement was way more powerful than the opposition. In his victory speech, Mamdani didn't just celebrate, he fired right back. He went straight after billionaires like Donald Trump, promising to end what he called the culture of corruption that lets the super wealthy dodge taxes. And his message to all his opponents, it was incredibly clear and totally defiant. Instead of asking them to quiet down, he challenged them with just 4 simple words. Turn the volume up. Basically a sign that he has absolutely no intention of being intimidated. All right, last section. NYC's new chapter. Look, this win isn't just about one guy becoming mayor. It feels like the start of a whole new era for New York, and it's got implications that go way beyond the city itself. For years and years, New York politics has been all about this pro-business, middle-of-the-road approach. Mamdani's win is a complete 180 from that tradition. Now, the focus is shifting to those grassroots concerns like affordable housing and wealth inequality, the very things he built his campaign on. And the ripple effects are being felt way beyond New York City. His victory as the first Muslim mayor of one of the world's most famous cities is a massive milestone for political representation all across the Western world. So, this all leaves us with one big question to chew on. Mamdani's victory points point to a powerful new kind of grassroots-driven city politics. As New York steps into this totally new chapter, you have to wonder, could this become the new playbook for other major cities all around the globe?